Hi guys, welcome back to Garden Theory. Today I have a compilation video for y'all. The last couple of videos we talked about the elements of landscape design. So we're going to go through all of them in this video. And so hopefully you like this compilation video. If you'd like me to do future kind of longer videos like this, just let me know down in the comments. So I really hope you enjoy this video series, and if you're new, this is Garden Theory. Thank you for stopping by to watch. My name's Zach. I have 5 years of industry experience in landscaping, design, and build, as well as maintain. I have a bachelor's degree in horticulture, and this is just a video series I'm doing on the side, just kind of for fun for right now. Just trying to help teach people about good landscape design practices and how you can make your home into the beautiful space that you've dreamed it could be. And so with that, I'm just going to dive into the elements. And so these are the elements of landscape design. So our first one, which is the one we're going to be talking about today, is line. And then we have shape, form, color, texture, space, and value. So those are the 7 elements of landscape design. And we're going to talk about the principles of landscape design in a future video. And so a good way to think about it is the elements are the tools that we use to create art, and the principles is how we use the tools. So right now we're going to talk about the tools of how you can create a beautiful landscape design. So I hope that makes sense. And we're going to dive into line today. And so line and landscape design, it's a pretty simple concept, but there's a lot of different ways that can dramatically change how people feel and experience your landscape design. It can make the difference from something feeling cold and formal to soft and natural. So it's a really big part and something that you want to pay attention to when you're designing how you want your garden space to be. So there's a couple different types of lines. So there's horizontal, vertical, diagonal, straight, curved. You can have a broken band of a line. And so those are kind of all the different types of basic line shapes that we can use in landscape design. And so I'll just walk through them one by one with y'all, just to showcase how you can use each one of those different types of line in your space. You may have seen this before. Again, like I said earlier, maybe you didn't quite have the language for it. And so hopefully you'll be able to recognize this in the places that you go visit. And that way you can kind of point it out to your friends and be weird like I am. So we'll talk about the first one, which is kind of straight, vertical or horizontal lines. These are very common in formal spaces. A lot of times they all connect at 90-degree angles, and having this formal line setup can make the space feel very formal. You'll see it a lot, for example, at the Palace of Versailles. That's a very formal garden in France. You'll see it a lot in national monuments, parks, anything that's kind of all squared out. Everything's kind of to the grid. It's all in a line. And a lot of times that can feel pretty cold. They use it a lot in modern houses. A lot of times the landscape matches the cold, straight, and horizontal lines of those modern types of buildings. And so it's almost kind of like the ground version of a modern house, of that style, at least, I mean. And so it creates a very formal style, which can be good if you want to create a very strong sense of space for something. For example, very formal landscape designs can be used well for weddings, different ceremonies, and stuff like that. So it does have its place, and so that's something you kind of want to think about when you're doing your landscape design is, do I want something to feel more formal and proper, or do I want things to feel more naturalistic? And a little spoiler, but you can mix the different types of lines to create different harmonies and contrasts to a space. So you can kind of create emphasis that way as well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So vertical lines are lines, a lot of times your vertical lines can be used, like if you have an arbor or a trellis or something like that, where you have something over your head, and you have vines and stuff. Those can all create vertical lines. Trees are also really good for creating vertical lines as they go up on their trunks. And so that's something you can consider. Some people like to put trees in a row, and so you have all these vertical lines going up. You can also create lines through different flowers and foliage that you have. You can have flowers, for example, like a hollyhock, where their flowers go straight up a couple feet, and those can create vertical lines that way. So there's a lot of ways you can complement the lines that you have in your overall design with the different plants that you have to complement it. So that's one way you can kind of have those complements and contrasts by using different lines. And so moving on to like curved lines, these are the more naturalistic lines. They flow and weave throughout the space. There's no harsh angles or edges. Everything kind of flows and is very naturalistic. And this makes it feel very soft and inviting to people. And so that's one way that you can create those lines. You can also have things like a water feature or a stream create those natural lines for you, and you can kind of complement those lines. There's a lot of ways you can expand upon whatever natural features you have in your landscape. With different types of lines, you can make different spaces feel different. For example, if you have a lot of long horizontal lines, that can help make your space feel wider. If you have vertical lines instead, it makes it feel narrower. All these different things can lead to different types of feelings of your space. You can also use line to create focal points or places of emphasis. By having converging lines come to a point, all the lines kind of focus your eye and your movement to that one spot. And that can often be used for a statue, maybe a special tree, or a water feature of some kind. So you can kind of direct everyone to this place of focal point and emphasis and stuff like that. And you can also have disconnected lines. It kind of helps to make a formal line feel more informal by having it be disconnected at different points, but it all matches up to a line. But you can have different clusters of things all kind of converge together. And so those were kind of our different types of lines that we use in landscape design. Another way we can use lines is in our hardscape material. There's a lot of different paver options when you're designing like a patio, for example. You can use the lines and the paver and the paver's pattern to complement whatever landscape design features you have as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. One style of landscape design is you can match the architecture of your home with the lines that you have for your patio or something like that. That's another way you can emulate the lines in your home's architecture into your landscape. And like I said earlier, you can mix and match them. A lot of times I like to do a more formal straight line hardscape with the naturalistic landscape lines. And so those two complement each other by having some hardness as well as some softness in the landscape design. So those are some ways you can use line. Hi guys, I'm here at Memorial Park in Bentonville where I live, and I'm here to showcase some of the really fun ways that they use shape here in this park. So right now where I'm at, as you can kind of see behind me, is there's this circle formation of these cypress trees that go all the way around in a circle surrounding this bed right behind me in the center. And so this becomes kind of an enclosure of a space. And so having these, using the shape of a circle for these trees, creates this kind of really cool sense of space for the area, which I really like. And another really fun way is there's a pond back there behind me, and a lot of the pathways follow the curves of the pond. But I'm going to walk over here. I'm going to show you, let me swing this around. I'm going to show you one of the other really cool ways they use space in this park. And so let me just walk over here. So I'm going to start right here. So right behind me is this circle bed with the cypress around it, and then we're going to swing around 160. Then they have this square, let me move the camera to the side here. They have this square patch of lawn that leads to the pond. And so that really provides, it's almost like a keyhole shaped design, and that helps to provide a sense of structure leading your eye and yourself as you walk through the space towards the pond. So that's one way you can use shape to create senses of enclosure and privacy, and then out into an open formal space in the front. So that's just a fun way you can use shape, and I hope you enjoyed this. So another way they emulate the curves of this circle is that they have these arbors that go around the whole top of this, providing another additional layer of the curvature as well as added height for shade and just as a pretty cool feature. So I wanted to stop here as well to showcase these really beautiful cypress trees. So another way we can talk about form, so shape is like the 2D objects on the ground, but form is the 3D objects. And so there's a lot of great forms we can use with our plant material, and one of these is these cypress trees behind me. So they have a very tall and slender form to them, and so having that provides a sense of formality to the space as well as a sense of enclosure on the inside. That's one way you can divide your spaces, is by having taller objects to create a sense of mystery behind them and privacy. A lot of times, you know, when we're talking about landscape design, you'll hear short plants in the front, tall in the back, but it's also okay to mix these up a little bit to create different rooms or spaces in your outdoor design. A lot of ways taller plants can help to provide a sense of mystery to your space, having something that's a little out of view until you turn the corner and you almost enter a whole other section of the garden that way. So that's one way we can use different varying sizes of plants, including trees like these cypress, to create beautiful spaces. So a few examples of different shapes in our garden. We talked a little bit about this in our last episode with line, but there's kind of two main different types of gardens. There's formal and informal gardens. And so typically formal gardens have very straight lines, everything's very manicured, very clean look. And on the informal side, you can kind of think of like English cottage gardens. Everything's kind of messy and it flows together. There's not really any kind of straight lines typically. And so those are kind of our two extremes on this spectrum. And you can mix and match a little bit. I'm not saying you have to go all natural or all formal. You can have a little bit of both. But those are kind of our two starting points that we're going to work with. Typically, our more formal shapes are going to be things like squares and rectangles, things that are ending in 90-degree angles. All of those things are going to give us a more formal look. When you have a square patch of lawn, that's very formal, but if you have a very natural meandering patch of lawn, that's a lot more natural. So those are kind of what I'm talking about with different shapes. And for our naturalistic shapes, those are things like circles, and just kind of naturalistic forms or blobs, you know. A lot of times you'll see, even on big projects, you'll see if, like, for example, if you have a pond or a stream, you can have the path match the meandering position of that stream. So that's one way you can emulate the natural forms that you already have in your backyard. You can also have it follow the tree line, you know, all those kind of things. If you're replicating nature, that's typically going to give you a more naturalistic feel, having the curves, things really soft. And so typically you're not going to have a whole lot of harsh angles or anything. And so that's kind of the two main differences between the two. And so you can actually complement some of the shapes that you have in your walkways and your garden spaces by the plants that you choose, because different plants also help emulate some of those shapes. For example, alliums with their circle flowers on those stalks can help give that circle form into your space, especially if you have different circular pathways. Those alliums kind of help repeat that pattern. You can also have things such as hydrangeas with their big mop head flowers that are really beautiful. So you kind of want to keep in mind the different shapes of flowers. You want to have a diverse amount of different shapes. There's some flowers that are tall and skinny, like foxgloves or snapdragons. Then you have some that spread out, like different types of ground cover. And then you have some that fan out, like cone flowers or black-eyed Susan. So you want to have a good mix and variety of different shapes and textures in the leaves and stuff like that when we're choosing our plants down the road. I don't currently have a garden space of my own, so sometimes it's a little tough to explain these things and concepts just talking to the camera, but I hope You know that I just want to help y'all out the best I can. Have you ever wondered how to create stunning color palettes for your garden? One of my favorite things about gardening is the wonderful color palettes that people can come up with. Color is crucial for landscape design because it can completely transform a space and evoke so many different emotions. Over the last 2 episodes, talked a lot about different elements and principles of design, and in this episode, we're going to talk about color and value. We will explore how pastels and saturated colors can affect your garden's aesthetic. Let's discover how you can bring your garden to life with color. I do want to preface today's episode. I'm not a huge expert in colors, so I hope this episode doesn't come off as me telling you what colors you should pick for your garden. Today I'm going to just talk about some of the colors that I really enjoy in a couple different gardens that we're going to walk through today. And we're just going to explore those, how they make me feel, which color palettes I like, and hopefully that can rub off on you on any color palettes that you like from today's episode. So with that, let's get going. So for this segment, I thought it'd be fun to go look at some of the gardens that I visited over the course of 2024. I put a couple clips together into this pretty short. I think it's only 4 minutes. So it shouldn't take us very long to get through these, and we'll just talk about some of the colors that I really liked from some of these gardens. We'll talk a little bit about the plants. And so, yeah, hopefully this works. This is kind of my first time I'm kind of messing with OBS, so hopefully the recording all sounds good. But let's just go ahead and dive in. So let me go ahead and pause it real quick. So for this first batch of videos, this is at Crystal Bridges Museum. The first two places, we're going to do Crystal Bridges and the Ozark Botanical Garden. They're both kind of naturalistic, a lot of native plants and stuff like that. We'll look at those, and then we're going to go look at some annual flower beds that I visited. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. So on this one, we have some really pretty, let me pause it one more time. We got some really pretty golden ragwort. Makes this beautiful ground cover in the spring with all these beautiful yellow flowers on it. I believe they're related to, I think it's the aster family of plants, but they're a really good native plant. The deer don't mess with them too much from what I've seen. And throughout the rest of the year after they're done flowering in the early spring, and I'm kind of talking like March to April from what I remember last year. But once they die back, it's kind of a ground cover, kind of leafy. It's not super interesting after the flowers, but it's a really good one. We're talking about the color yellow because it is a great plant to have yellow flowers for, especially for those early spring months. If you want something besides, bulbs and stuff like that, it's a really good native plant for those first early spring flowers. So yeah, as you can kind of see on some of these clips, it just kind of coats the entire hillside and it looks so pretty. I'm a big fan of golden ragwort in the spring. It's such a pretty one. Another really good one that we'll show some clips here in 1 second. But you compare it with Virginia bluebells really nicely because they bloom kind of the same time. And I believe there's a clip, or actually no, sorry. This one, there's one little clip before but this is Celandine poppy. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's a native poppy species in the eastern United States. It's a really good one. The deer do like to nibble on this one. It's not as resistant as the golden ragwort. That's another great one to pair with those yellow flowers, and it's a very sweet little poppy that I like. So that's it right there. Yeah, and so this is the Virginia bluebell I was talking about. These guys are doing really good. They're kind of similar to bulbs. I don't think they're quite a bulb. They might be a corm or something else. But they got these really pretty blue flowers. They kind of start off a little purple as buds, but as they bloom, they have a really nice, pretty blue color to them, as you see in this clip. And you can kind of see where they get their name, Virginia bluebells, and they pair really nicely with the golden ragwort. So let me pause here. This is an oak leaf hydrangea, another one native to the eastern United States. I want to bring up this one and other hydrangeas as well because I really love hydrangea's white flowers on these ones at least. I know there's some that are kind of purple and blue, but these really white flowers in particular, let me pause it on this clip here too. This is I think that's a limelight hydrangea. I'm not 100% sure. But hydrangeas, especially these really nice white ones, white's always an interesting color for me. I think it kind of gives a spirit of elegance to it and grace. It's kind of a almost a formal look of a flower, even though it's not really that different in terms of other colors. But I think white really stands out. I really like white flowers in the evening because as the sun sets and there's less light, that white really pops out against it at night. And I really like how the white flowers look at in the evening. And so I think white flowers, they're very striking due to them being that bright color that they are. And so they really pop out against some of the other more dull colors that you may have in your landscape design. And sometimes white could be a little daunting to pair with. And I think there's a clip after this one that kind of will show an example of that. Or I think it might be later down in here, but we'll talk about it when we get to that point. And so, yeah, I really like hydrangeas. They're one of my favorites. So let me pause on this clip. So this is Northern Sea Oat. And I wanted to bring up our grasses, like ornamental grasses, because they're a really good one for your colors because a lot of times we don't want to be too afraid of using greens. There's a couple other clips in here we'll talk about that. But we really don't want to be too afraid of using our greens and browns in our color design. And a lot of the ways we can use our green colors is through the textures, which is a principle of landscape design that we're going to talk about in its own episode. But grasses are a great way to add motion to the space from how it flows. And using different varieties, you can have excitement even with using green colors. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we do the principles of landscape design. But yeah, I really like northern sea oats. They're such a pretty one. Another fun name for them is fish on a pole, which I find fun. So this one is a white variation of a red or of a red bud. This is kind of one of those kind of weeping ones that they made. And this is at Crystal Bridges, I think, as well. And so this picture's of a normal redbud tree that you've probably seen as a little bit more common. But I wanted to mention these because I think these are the only trees I have on this color video. There's some sirens going outside, so hopefully you don't hear this while I'm talking. But with trees, you want to be pretty smart with your tree choices when we're talking about color, because they're a great way that you can add color up higher in your canopy. Because a lot of times with our perennials, they're kind of roughly all on the same level. And so having trees with their beautiful flowers, you have your dogwoods and redbuds in the spring. Even some magnolia species are in the spring into the summer. So it's a great way to transition from different periods of the year to add different coloring interests. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we kind of want to make sure we're planning for the entire season when we're picking our colors. But yeah, I really like redbud trees. And they're actually edible. Don't know if any of y'all have tried it. I tasted it last spring and it actually wasn't too bad, so I definitely would recommend trying those out. So let me pause on this clip here. So this is at the Butterfly Garden at Crystal Bridges. And these are right before most of their flowers were about to bloom. But you can still see, even right now where everything's still green and a whole lot of flowers yet, you can still see the variety of different textures of the leaves, different heights on some of them, and so you can create interest that way. Even when your plants are a little low on their flowers, it's if things are dwindling, it's good to have a high variety of different plants like you see in these beds, because that provides interest in and of itself to have that diversity in there. I would typically try to stay away from just picking one or two main plants. It's good to have a good variety, just as you see in this flower bed. So yeah, so now we're gonna move on to the Ozark Botanical Garden. And they were really good with their design. It was a really good mix of annuals with native plants. And so I thought they did a great job with this. And so this is one of their annual beds. And so this is a good example of pairing white flowers. In this case, we got red and yellow tulips with a primarily white, looks like pansies or violas in the foreground, which I think that works pretty well. Sometimes it's good to have just a pairing of colors to go next to the white
if you're adding a bunch of colors to the white, it might look a little like, those white confetti birthday cakes, And so of course, there's different color palettes you can do with that, but I think they do a pretty good job here. They also have that transition of the height going from the white violas up to the red and yellow tulips. And so I think that's a pretty good one. We're sticking with kind of formal shapes on this one because we got the layered looks and everything's kind of in together on that line. But this is the one that I really liked quite a bit. They did a great job on their borders, mixing annuals and perennials. And so if you look closely, some of the perennials we got a couple shrubs. I don't remember if those were peonies or not. There's a few shrubs in there, perennial salvia. I believe alliums come back every year, so that would be a perennial. But then we have all the pansies and the ground cover that are annual that are kind of mixed in, and so I think they did a really good job on these beds. I think that's really a good way to do it. And so we kind of see from what I can tell from the video, our main perennials are these purples and they kind of repeat the purple color with different plants. So they have purple salvia and purple alliums repeated in sections throughout the landscape. And then they have the more colorful, there looks like there's a band of pink flowers going in there. Maybe the shrubs kind of look like they might have pink flowers. And then we have a more colorful pansy at the base. And so I think that's a really good way to repeat that pattern. So let me pause here. That's another good look at the bed. So again, we have that. I think those pink flowers might be phlox from what it looks like. And sorry if my eyes get off center. I kind of have to look at these images while we're talking, but we kind of see that repeating pattern, and I think they do a pretty good job on these. I was pretty impressed. And so let me pause here. So there's another one. They do a lot of white and mixing with different colors, and I think that works out pretty well for them. I really like the mixing of white, purple, and pink, and this one's got a bit of yellow in there too. So I think the main thing is, not to be too afraid of mixing different colors together. Sometimes we kind of want to stick with what we know. I think it's also good to experiment sometimes. You're like, well, I'm not sure if these will go well together, but let me experiment, maybe just on one area. And if I like it, we can expand it. This is another really pretty spot of a lot of great different greens. And the way we're bringing interest to the space is through all those beautiful different textures that they have. So from the hostas to the sedges to the base of those columbines, they all look really pretty. And those little, almost like someone splashed a paintbrush of blue in there. That just adds that nice little focal point. And maybe ordinarily those columbines wouldn't be a focal point if they were surrounded by a whole lot of other big flowers. But being smart with how they place this, with having a lot of greens, it kind of helps to create those focal point on the columbine. Having them have that tall and blue speckles of flowers, I think look really nice together. So that's one way, we can limit our color options, but we can still provide interest and a focal point to the space. And so I think these are a type of false indigo that are yellow. I'm not 100% sure what species these are, but that's a really pretty yellow flower. And again, it's really good to mix and repeat colors from your perennials to your annuals to your shrubs and trees. Another really great color of those really pretty blue irises. And I think irises you can pretty much get in any color nowadays from red to blue and yellow. I mean, I think you can get them in almost any of the main colors. All right, so this is the one I was talking about with the hydrangeas, how to pair white colors with others. And so this one's kind of got I believe what you would call a triadic color scheme, where you have three colors that are equal distance across the color wheel. And so we got yellow, red, and blue in this one, as well as pink, but that's just red with more white in it. So it's really just those three main colors that we have. And I think that works pretty well with the white. I think that makes it almost a little bit more playful that way. I think it makes having the white in the background with the really pretty colors in the foreground. I think play well together. I feel like it makes it kind of exciting, you know, almost like it would be a garden space for kids and stuff like that. And so that's kind of the atmosphere that gives me a playful and a nice vibe, and it kind of helps to lower the brightness of the hydrangeas having that in the foreground. All right, so this is another really there's a lot of plants going on in this one. So this one I really like. It's got um, kind of three main colors. It's got the yellow from these black-eyed Susans, and we got a bit of purple from some, I think there might be sun pations and the purple fountain grass. And then we also have a bit of white in there, as well as the green from the sweet potato vine. And so I think all of those really pair nicely together. And there's a bit of yellow in the sweet potato vines. Um, yeah, I'll pause it right here. But there, since that sweet potato vine's got that really nice yellow green in there, the yellow that's in that green kind of helps to pair well with the black-eyed Susan's kind of mustardy yellow. And so having that contrast from the purple and the yellow as your base, but we're not really having a direct contrast line here. It's kind of a split complementary color. And so I think that works pretty well in this one that I really like. Yeah, so this is a good closer shot of it. So you can kind of see the purple in those sun pations, and then having that contrast against the yellow that's in the black-eyed Susan and that yellow green in the sweet potato vine. And so that kind of helps to create a excuse me, a natural contrast with the little specks of white in there as well, which I think look really nice. And so yeah, think that's another great way to combine your colors, and I think that looks really pretty. All right, so here's another one we got a lot of different colors on. So we have, I believe, coleus and towards the middle. We got two different types. We got one with a kind of red maroon foliage, and then another one with that yellow green color on it. And both of those complement each other pretty nicely, I think. Um, and then we got a lot of blue, purples, and pinks in the rest of the annuals. And so this one's a pretty bold color scheme. That might be a bit more of a tricky one. I'll pause it right here. That's a pretty good close-up look of it. This one could be a little tricky. I think blue and maroon go pretty well together as complementary colors. And then the pink and the yellow of the other one, I think pair nicely too. And so this one's kind of an interesting one. We got a bit of, not quite sure what kind of color scheme this would be off the top of my head. But this one, again, a good example of, you know, it's okay to be bold with some of your colors. I think they can still work out, even if you're not quite sure what kind of color scheme you're coming up with. All right, so for these final clips, these are some tulip annual arrangements I wanted to look over since we're kind of getting towards that time of year where we're going to start seeing some of those bulbs pop back up here in the next few weeks. And so this one's a really pretty one. We got mainly red and orange as the main ones it looks like, and we got a little bit of pink and white in there as well. And so a lot of times when we're having our warm colors from red, yellow, and orange, a lot of those kind of bring a lot of warmth and excitement to your space, where your blue and purples and greens sometimes will bring some cool and and some calming energy to the space. And so having a lot of excitement in that I think works well for spring flowers. And there's a little bit of blue pansies in there and violas in the underground with on the underneath level of it, which I think adds as a nice complement to it. So here's one. This is more of a formal design for our tulips. We kind of have two main rows. We got some yellow and white daffodils on one side and some pink, um, kind of salmony orange colored tulips on the other. And so I think that works really well. Pink and yellow are great spring and kind of Easter colors, people call them. And so I think those work well together. And that's a way, you know, we kind of just have two main lines, and there's nothing wrong if we want to just keep it to lines and shape. I think that works well, but I also like the mix look as well. I think that works too. And I believe this is our last one for this video. So we have purple and pink in the middle and yellow and white on the outside. And so purple and yellow being contrasting colors on the color wheel are going to naturally provide some interest there. And so I think that looks really nice. I think that's a great way to do our colors. And so hopefully you enjoyed going through some of these, and hopefully you like some of the color palettes I showed here. I know this probably isn't all possible color palettes you can come up with. You can probably come up with a ton of different ones if you really tried. But I hope this at least showed you some examples of different color palettes you can try in your own backyard.
Alright, so I hope you enjoyed going through those gardens. For the last part of this video, I kind of want to give you all some tips and feedback that I talked a little bit about. The main thing is talking about how to plan for your colors for your entire season. We want to do our best to try to have seasonal interest for all 4 seasons of the year. So I think it's always a great idea when we're talking about garden design is we'll get some pen and a notebook out and just kind of write down some of our favorite plants and their bloom times, especially in the ones of colors that you would like. So I would go, starting on spring flowers, which ones you like, summer, fall, winter. And whenever you have a gap of something, you're like, oh, I'm not sure if I'll have something between our early summer flowers to our early fall ones during that heat of summer. Maybe I don't have something. I think that's a great time to research different ones so we have different colors cycling throughout the entire year. And that way you can have all those really pretty colors to enjoy. But like I mentioned, we can also have a lot of fun just with our greens and different foliage and stuff like that. I would definitely ask y'all to share some of your favorite colors that we talked about in this video. What are some of your favorite color palettes that you like to see? But let's move on to talking about texture. And so texture is a really fun one. I really enjoy textures quite a lot. You might notice a theme in some of the videos if you've watched all of them to this point, is that I really like the cottage garden type look. I really like having a diverse palette of plants at your disposal. I think it's really fun to have things that are very exciting and full of energy. When you just use the same like 2 or 3 plants over and over again in your landscape, to me it kind of loses that magic a little bit. And so I like to have a really diverse palette of plants, and so that's kind of what I'll share, at least from my experience. You're welcome to have your own taste. I think every garden can be unique and special. That's why I named this channel Garden Theory, because I don't think there's one right way to do a garden. There's pretty much almost infinite different possibilities you can come up with. So that's why I named this channel Garden Theory. But going back to texture, there's kind of, I would say, like 3 types of textures that I can think of in my head. There's what I would call like a fine texture, which would be like a grass, something that's really feathery, loft. Sometimes can add a bit of movement to your space from it swaying in the wind. And so those are one type of texture. Another type would be, I guess I would call it like a coarse texture, something that has a rough surface to it or something. Like you could do sedums, different types of ground cover, something that's going to add a lot of busyness to it. It has a lot of stuff going on with it that can make it look busy or coarse. Another type of texture would be having smooths and like big smooth leaves and stuff like that. Things like hosta leaves or elephant plant leaves. Something that's going to add a really big element to the space, even if it's just a bunch of leaves. Having that smoothness can kind of help contrast against some of your other more busy flowers. I think those are kind of the main 3 ones that I can think of. There may be more definitions of different textures, but I think those are kind of your main 3. Our feathery light textures, we have our coarse heavy textures, and then we have our smooth kind of flat textures. And so those are kind of the 3 main ones. I think having a really good high variety of those in your landscape can kind of help add interest to your space. Even if you're doing like an evergreen garden where you don't have any flowers and it's all shrubs and leaves and stuff, you can add a lot of interest that way. So even if you don't have color in your landscape, you can add interest to it by using texture. Now, a lot of times you'll see a lot of these elements will go hand in hand. So if you have a high variety of different colors and stuff like that in your landscape, you're kind of naturally going to have a high variety of textures from all the different plants. But it's just something to consider. I might have to do a walkthrough one of these days with y'all, maybe at another garden or something, where we can go look at some of these textures when things start greening up here in a few weeks. I think that might be the best way to showcase that. So that might be a video you see from me in a couple weeks from now. But I think that'll help kind of drive the point home going to a garden space and showcasing that to you. So I'll try to see if I can find some for y'all.
I'm here at Crystal Bridges today to walk around the space here and to talk about the element of space and how we can use it in landscape design. So we're going to go around and I'll talk about a couple places that I found pretty good use of space and how you can use different amounts of space in your landscape design to help promote different feelings as you walk through your landscape design.
So I decided to do a voiceover of our space video over top of the footage I took at Crystal Bridges, mainly because there's a lot of people walking around and I'm still not super comfortable recording videos in public, so hopefully you don't mind the voiceover. But we're going to be talking about space today, and so space is really what we're designing when we're designing our landscapes. We're dividing up how we want our space to be used. And so it's kind of the area between all the objects in our design, and it's kind of what all the elements we've talked about up to this point kind of come together for the creation of space and what we experience as we go through our landscape or garden spaces. And so space can be small, intimate, even romantic, and it can also be large, spacious, and somewhat grand. And there's space in between these two opposites. So space, you might have heard this phrase before. It's used in various amount of designing, from landscape to interior and stuff like that. But space needs to be designed for its intended purpose. So form follows function. And so we need to understand human space and our own comfort factors as human beings. And so you might have heard before, like, your own personal bubble, stay out of my bubble. And so anything, within, 4 to 5 feet of you, what your experience is pretty intimate and personal. So like if we designed a chair and a reading nook little area, that's a really small, kind of more personal space. Compare that to like your front porch, which is a little bit more social. It's still kind of private because you can sit out there, enjoy your garden space, but you can still have that social interaction part of it. And then like a lawn or a big back patio, stuff like that, that's a lot more social, almost more public, where you're inviting people into your space. And so that's kind of all the different dynamics of space. I'll talk about a couple examples through some of the footage. Like a pathway with lots of shrubs and trees covering the top of your vertical space that makes it very enclosed against an open lawn or like a patio I said that's a very open and expansive space. And so these all have different emotions, and so depending on what kind of vibe or atmosphere you want for your environment, these are kind of things you want to naturally consider, because everything's going to have its own purpose and its own feeling. Alright, so I wanted to walk through this landscape design with y'all just to showcase a couple examples of how you can use space for, in this example, your backyard. A good way we can think of our spaces, like I said before, is kind of smaller, intimate spaces and then larger, more open ones. And so, for example, kind of just broad strokes of space, the lawn's going to be a lot more encompassing than this small sidewalk over here with the trees and shrubs. But some examples of how we're using space to create these atmospheres, if you will. Like the red bud on the corner of this property where it's overarching that corner of the sidewalk. That's going to help to make that sidewalk feel a lot more private and intimate as you're walking through from a public space of your driveway into your kind of side yard here. And so that's one way we're trying to block that off, as well as with these shrubs and ground covers along it. This all helps to make that entrance feel a lot more secluded, as well as somewhat hidden. And then in the back here we have the reading nook with the arbor, as well as the fruit trees and shrubs, all designed to help make this feel more of a private place. Whereas in the back patio, we have more space open to us because we have seating area, we want our grill, we have a water feature. A lot more dynamics is going on here to help make this more of a social place where you'll bring family and friends back here to eat dinner and enjoy the sound from the water. And so all of these things are going into how we're utilizing our space effectively. And then back here on this part of the lawn portion is kind of designed as a separate space of the lawn, even though it's connected. The idea was to have a play set or a trampoline in the middle of this, and then as well as we have the blackberries with the little trail and bench off to the side of the lawn, which kind of connects it to this kind of somewhat of a play area right here, of a more separate area than the main lawn, even though it's still connected. And then we have another example. We have kind of one of those lawn walkways where it's about 8 to 10 feet wide, going through the front to the back. And so it kind of connects it. And again, we have the trees overlooking it, as well as the shrubs. And so this is just all different ideas you can use to create different atmospheres or experiences. And then of course the front is probably our most public space, with the front sidewalk right here, the lines, and then the front patio, which is still an area we can relax, enjoy our flower beds and our landscaping, but it is still open to the public. So hopefully this little walkthrough of this landscape design I did while I was at BYU Idaho kind of helps illustrate some of these points. We're just kind of sticking to general basics for now. But if you have any specific questions for your own landscape, just feel free to comment them down and I can do a full video covering them. So thank you so much for watching this video.